Hello, YTPC. This is Preacher Man Piper, Doc Hatfield coming to you. Going to give you another uh, story of my life. This story happened when I was a teenager, and uh, I had met a young lady, and I'll just tell you her first name, won't tell you her last name, but her name was Peggy, and we both took from the same piano teacher. And so uh, one thing led to another, and we started seeing each other, as boyfriend and girlfriend. And she would come to church with me every Sunday night. Every Sunday night, we'd go by and we'd pick her up. She'd come to church with me. She'd sit with me in church, and we became pretty much an item. And everybody always expected Peggy to come. And so uh, every now and then, when I go over to her house, her parents would ask me to stay for supper, and I'd stay for supper, and and of course, whenever we first started seeing each other, we didn't hear each other play because she would take a lesson, then I would take a lesson, then I'd walk her home from taking the piano lessons. Well, uh, this one particular uh, time when I asked her if she'd go to church with me, and she said, "Well, I can't go on Sunday morning, but I can go on Sunday night." Well, what she didn't know was I was the church pianist, so she would come to church and she would hear me play the piano, and she would just rave on and on about it to her parents. And so I was over there eating supper one evening, and they asked me if I would play something for them, and I said, "Well, sure, I can play you something." And so I played a couple of numbers for them, and uh, and then it wasn't long till I had a uh, I had a concert at the city auditorium, and of course we invited uh, Peggy and her parents to come, and they came and listened, and this went on for probably about a year, maybe a year and a half, that she would come to church with me every Sunday night. Well, uh, one day when I walked her home, her mother asked me uh, if I would speak to uh, Peggy's dad. He wanted to ask me a question, so I said sure, and so I went up on the porch, and he was sitting on the porch, and he said, "Would you consider coming to our church on a Sunday night and doing a concert in our church?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I would do it." I said, "But you'll have to ask my mother and dad, uh, and 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 get their permission for me to come." I said, "Because they're real strict about where I go to church." And they said, "Okay." So then the next Sunday night, when we went and picked her up for church and took her to church and brought her back, they were standing out there waiting on us, and they asked if we would all come in for just a minute. They wanted to talk to us. Well, my mother and dad didn't know what that was about, but they went in and we sat down, and so uh, Peggy's dad asked, said, "The reason we've asked you in here is because we would like for your son to come over to our church on a Sunday night and do a recital for us, or a concert as like he did at the city auditorium." And my mother immediately spoke up and said, "No, no, he cannot do that. He cannot do that." And she got up and walked out. Well, my dad said, "Well, said really, we try to stay within our own uh, church, uh, and we normally don't go to other churches that are denominations of any kind." And he said, "What church do y'all go to?" They said, "Well, we go to the First Presbyterian Church here in town." And he said, "Well," he said, "I'll have to pray about that." Well, we left, and so I asked my dad. I said, "Well, you didn't tell him no." He said, "No, I didn't. I said I'd pray about it." And my mother said, "Well, you're not going, and that's the end of it. Now I ain't going to hear no more about it." Well, needless to say, I wasn't listening to her. I was listening to him. Well, a few weeks later, he come to me and he said, "Son," he said, "you can go just this one time. And since you're doing a concert, uh, I don't see why you can't do that one time. But now you can't be going over and over, nor can you start going to other churches over and over to do concerts. You can only do your music in our churches. Is that understood?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it is." And so when we took Peggy home the next Sunday night, my dad got out. My mother didn't. She was very, very unpleasant to say the least. And so my dad told him, said, "Yes, said we can do that. We can let him come. Uh, if your pastor will call me and verify all of this, I will let him come and do a concert on Sunday night." Well, that pastor called within a few weeks and had a date set for me to come. And so my dad said, "Well, he'll be there." And so instead of us going over that Sunday night to pick up Peggy, Peggy's parents came over and picked me up, and we all went to their church. Well, needless to say, I had never been in any other church except an independent, fundamental, hard shell Baptist church. It's the only kind of church I'd ever been in. I'd never been in any other church with a different name. And so uh, uh, we went in, and they took us into the church. He immediately introduced me to the pastor, and the pastor said, "Well, we'll have a couple of numbers to sing, and we'll take up our offering, and then I'm going to just turn it over to you, and you come up and do whatever it is you want to do." I said, "Okay." So that's what I did. I went up there and I played for about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. And uh, just as I finished the last song, there was a loud popping noise that just almost hurt your ears. It was so loud. Everybody ducked with their hands over their ears because it was so loud. I got up and went down, was going to go down and sit down where Peggy and her parents were sitting. And just as I got up off the piano, again, a loud, multiple popping noises took place and screeching like you never heard. And everybody looked up, and Peggy's dad run up and grabbed me and took us out the side door, and we just barely made it out that door when the entire roof of that sanctuary fell flat down. I mean, that entire roof fell completely down. Well, of course, then they called the fire department, they called the police department, they called everything. My brother was on duty as a deputy sheriff at that time, and he come. He didn't know that I was there, and he looked over and saw me standing with the parents of this girl. And he come over to me, and he said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, Peggy's dad got us out of there just in the very nick of time. I said, we probably wasn't a foot out the door whenever that thing fell. And well, he said, I'll be back. And he went to go in to look. He couldn't get through the door because the entire roof was sitting there. And what they had come to find out was that they had just built this sanctuary. They had just built it. And it was built so that whenever they outgrew it, they could raise the roof up and put a balcony in that auditorium. Well, instead of it being raised up, it flat come down. I mean, it squashed anything and everything, including that nice 9-foot Steinway grand piano. And my brother said, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take JD home if you don't care. He said, no, that'll be fine. And I said to Peggy, I said, well, Peggy, I'll see you tomorrow at the piano lesson. She said, okay, I'll see you then. And she kind of gave me a little peck, and I said to my brother, I said, okay, I'll go with you. So we got in his patrol car, and he took me home. Well, my mother and dad had just gotten home because they were waiting on me to get there. Because every Sunday night after church, my dad always went out to eat, and he was waiting on me to get there so we could all go together. So we get there, and they've got the radio on, and they're hearing that the entire roof of this thing fell, and they're thinking that their son's dead in a doornail when I walked through the door. And my mother swore up and down till her dying day that roof came down because I was there and wasn't supposed to be there. She said you wasn't supposed to be there, and God, he chastised them people for bringing you. And my dad said, that is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life. Said, you stop talking like that. She said, well, it's the truth, and I'm standing by it, and I don't care what anybody says. That's what he gets for being in a Presbyterian church, and he's an independent, fundamental, Bible-believing, hard-shell Baptist. Well, needless to say, I didn't go back over there. Nor did I go to any other kind of a church until years later. So it just goes to prove that sometimes when you play as hard and as loud as I played sometimes, that it just brings the roof down. So that's my story about the roof falling down. And I hope you enjoyed that. I pray God's blessings upon you. I pray that God will watch over you and take care of you, that He'll supply you every need, take care of every circumstance in your life. And until I see you again, until I come with another story, uh, enjoy your pipe, enjoy your tobacco. Bye bye.